At the will reading, my mom gave my sister $30 million. Then the lawyer read a secret that made her scream. The first time I saw the number, it was on a glossy sheet of paper that smelled like fresh toner and expensive cologne. $30 million and 0 cents. It sat there in black ink under my sister's name like it had always belonged to her. We were in the conference room of Caraway and Finch, a firm with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the river that looked curated, the kind of place where even the water outside seemed to move more politely. There was a carafe of lemon water no one touched, a tray of pastries arranged in circles like a suggestion, not an invitation. My mother sat across from me with her posture set like a decision. Pearl earrings, navy blazer, hair pinned back with the same precision she used when she corrected other people's grammar. Beside her was my sister, Sloane. Sloane wore white, not cream, not ivory. White. She'd chosen it the way some people chose a spotlight. Her heels were on even though we were sitting. Her phone lay face up on the table, camera angled slightly, as if the moment might need to be captured for later. I kept my hands folded in front of me, fingers interlaced. I'd learned years ago that calm made people careless. The lawyer, Mr. Coven, Finch cleared his throat and looked at his notes. He was a careful man, the kind who asked questions slowly, as if he was testing the air for consequences. "Thank you all for coming," he said. "We're here to read the last will and testament of—" He said my father's name. It landed in the room with the weight of something final. I didn't flinch. I didn't look down. I had already cried in quieter places, parking lots, my kitchen sink, once in the shower when the water could disguise the sound. Today was for listening. Sloane's lips pressed together in a performance of grief, a practiced sadness. She glanced at my mother and got a small nod, like approval for hitting her mark. Mr. Person was recognizing them as apparently bad men, Finch continued. "Before we begin, I want to confirm the attendees. Present are Mrs. Lorraine Hale, Ms. Severell, Sloane Hale, and Ms. Mara Hale." "Mara, that was me!" "You're good with money," the one who always sounded like a footnote next to Sloane. My mother didn't look at me when my name was said. She kept her gaze on the lawyer, as if eye contact with me might complicate the narrative she'd rehearsed.
"I'd expected that."
2 weeks earlier, she'd called me not to ask how I was holding up, not to talk about Dad, not even to tell me the time and address of this meeting. She called to give me instructions. "Or something simple," she'd said, like I was auditioning for a role. "And please don't make this harder than it needs to be. Your sister is already under so much pressure." Pressure. I'd been the one taking Dad to his appointments when he stopped trusting my mother's calendar. I'd been the one who noticed the pharmacy receipts tucked in the glove box, the one who sat beside him while he stared at the wall, trying to remember a word that used to come easily. Sloane posted a photo once, her hand on his shoulder, his eyes closed. The caption, "Holding my hero through hard times." It got 12,000 likes. She hadn't visited him in 3 months. When I mentioned that to my mother once, quietly, at the kitchen table, she smiled like I'd told a joke. "You always keep score, Mara," she'd said. "That's why people don't know how to relax around you." After that, I stopped offering truths that would be treated like personality flaws. Mr. Finch opened the folder and began. There were the predictable parts first. Personal effects, a small donation to a medical foundation, instructions for the burial plot already paid for, then the assets. He read in a steady, neutral voice, as if this were a weather report. "The primary residence located at 18 Briarwood Lane shall be transferred to Mrs. Lorraine Hale." My mother exhaled softly, like the universe had behaved. Sloane leaned back, satisfied. "I didn't own property. I rented a 1-bedroom apartment in a building where the elevator shook when it moved. I kept my life small on purpose. It was harder for people to take things from you when you didn't build them where they could see." Mr. Finch turned the page. "The investment portfolio held with Harlan Private Capital." Sloane's fingers tightened on the edge of the table. She had the kind of hands that looked good holding champagne flutes. "Is to be divided as follows." I watched my sister's pupils widen, just slightly. Anticipation was loud on her face even when she tried to hide it. $30 million, Mr. Finch read, "shall be distributed to Miss Mathis, Sloane Hale." Sloane's breath caught, not in grief, in victory. It was immediate. She covered her mouth, eyes shining, turning toward my mother as if she'd been awarded an Oscar and needed someone to clap. "Oh my God!" she said, already half laughing. "Mom!" My mother reached over and squeezed her hand. A soft public gesture. A photograph moment. I felt something settle inside me. Not anger, not surprise. More like confirmation. Because I'd known, in my bones, that whatever my father had built, my mother had decided who deserved it. And in my family, deserve wasn't about effort. It was about image. Sloane had always been my mother's display piece. In middle school, when Sloane forgot her lines in the school play and froze on stage, my mother blamed the director for not supporting her properly. When I won a state science award in 10th grade, my mother said, "That's nice, Mara," and then asked Sloane if she'd chosen a dress for homecoming. At my college graduation, my mother insisted on taking pictures of Sloane beside me, even though Sloane had dropped out after one semester and was between passions. "You look like the successful one standing next to her," my mother said, smoothing Sloane's hair. "It balances the photo, Mr. Padmouse's test." Finch did not pause for their celebration. He turned the next page like someone moving through a storm without commenting on the weather. Additionally, the remaining assets. Sloane lifted her chin, already calculating what remaining might mean. She was the kind of person who mentally spent money before it hit her account. Mr. Finch continued, "Shall be distributed to Miss Mara Hale." Sloane's smile didn't disappear, but it tightened. She glanced at my mother, quick, like she needed to confirm something. My mother's expression didn't change. I didn't react. I'd learned not to show relief in front of people who treated your relief like a mistake. "Mr. Finch looked down at the page again. "In the amount of, he read a number. It wasn't small. It was also not 30 million. It was enough to make people think I should be grateful. Enough to make it socially unacceptable for me to question anything. That was always my mother's strategy. Give me enough that I couldn't complain, without looking ugly." Sloane let out a little laugh, soft and musical, the sound she used when she wanted others to join in. "Well," she said, turning her head toward me with a sympathetic tilt, "at least you got something. That's nice. Nice." My mother didn't correct her, she just adjusted the cuff of her blazer, calm as ever. I met my sister's eyes briefly and then looked back at the table. I could feel the shape of the room. The windows, the city outside, the lawyer's steady breathing, the way my mother's perfume sat in the air like it owned the space. "Mr. Finch continued reading, listing account names, trust structures, the distribution timeline. Sloane stopped listening after her number. She started typing on her phone under the table, probably messaging her friends, probably writing, "I'm shaking," like she always did when she wanted attention to sound like humility. My mother was listening. She always listened when legality was involved. She didn't like surprises. She liked being the surprise. Then, Mr. Finch did something small that shifted the air. He lifted another document, separate from the will. His eyes flicked up, just for a second, toward my mother. Not confrontational. More like he was checking if she understood what was coming. My mother's jaw tightened, only slightly, but I saw it. Because I watched her the way people watch weather when they've been caught in storms before. "There is, Mr. Finch said, an additional statement attached to the will. "It is to be read aloud in full. It is signed and notarized." Sloane's fingers stopped moving. My mother's hand went still on the table. I didn't move. Mr. Finch adjusted his glasses and began, voice measured. "To my family," he read my father's words, and I could almost hear his tone in them. Calm, direct, a man who had learned too late how expensive silence could be. "I am aware that certain decisions have been made while I was ill. I am aware that certain accounts were accessed and certain signatures were used in ways I did not authorize." Sloane's head snapped up. My mother's eyes narrowed, sharp and quick.
Mr. Finch kept reading.
"I am also aware that my daughters have been treated differently, that one has been praised publicly and protected privately, that the other has been expected to endure quietly." My throat stayed steady. I didn't blink. Sloane let out a short, incredulous sound. Not a sob, more like a scoff that had been caught halfway. My mother leaned forward slightly. "Excuse me," she said, voice smooth but brittle at the edges. "What is this?" Mr. Finch didn't answer. He wasn't allowed to. he just read. If this is being read, it means I am no longer here to correct what I should have corrected earlier. Sloane's mouth opened and closed once, like her mind had skipped a beat. The room felt smaller. The city outside the window kept moving. Cars kept crossing bridges. People kept walking with coffee cups, unaware that inside this room, a family narrative was starting to crack. Mr. Patrick, Finch turned the page. To be clear, there is a condition attached to the distribution of the investment portfolio. Sloane's face changed, confusion, then suspicion. My mother's breath hitched, small, controlled but real. Mr. Pede, Finch's eyes stayed on the paper. And there is a secret that cannot remain buried. Sloane stood up so fast her chair scraped loudly against the floor. What secret? She snapped, the first time her voice lost its polish. My mother's hand shot out, palm down, a silent command to sit. Sloane didn't sit. Mr. Finch looked up once, then back down, unshaken. I remained seated, hands still folded, because I already understood something my sister didn't. This wasn't a celebration anymore. This was a reckoning, slow, legal, and documented. And whatever my father had left behind, it wasn't just money. It was evidence. I didn't say a word. I let my sister's panic fill the room while I stayed quiet, letting the truth take its time. Mr. Finch inhaled and continued reading. And as he spoke the next line, my mother's composure finally slipped, just enough for me to see it. I chose silence over reaction. And I listened. Sloane didn't scream then, not yet. What she did was worse. She laughed. Loud, sharp, performative. This is ridiculous, she said, looking around the room, like we were all extras in a poorly written drama. Dad was sick. He was paranoid at the end. Everyone knows that. My mother placed a hand on her arm, not to comfort her, to steady her. Mr. Finch did not engage. He had already returned to the document. The condition is as follows, he read. The funds allocated to Miss Sloane Hale shall be held in trust pending verification of financial activity conducted between March 14, 2019 and October 2, 2023. The dates landed cleanly. I recognized them immediately. March 14, 2019 was the day my father was formally diagnosed. October 2, 2023 was the day he died. Sloane's laugh died mid-breath. What does that mean? She demanded.
Verification by who? Mr. Finch finally looked up.
By an independent forensic accounting firm already retained. My mother's fingers curled inward, nails pressing into her palm. That's unnecessary, she said calmly. Too calmly. My husband trusted us. Mr. Seth.
Finch's tone didn't change. The firm was selected by Mr.
Hale himself. Sloane turned toward my mother, her face flushed.
Mom?
My mother stood, slowly. She smiled the way she smiled at charity luncheons when donors asked uncomfortable questions. My husband was very ill, she said. He had moments of confusion. I believe this statement reflects that. We will, of course, cooperate, but I expect this process to be quick. Mr. Polina has said that. Finch nodded once. That will be up to the auditors.
And the money?
Sloane asked, her voice higher now.
When do I get it? The funds are frozen, Mr.
Finch said. Until the review is complete. Sloane's mouth opened, closed. Then she screamed. It wasn't theatrical. It wasn't pretty. It was raw and panicked, and loud enough that someone in the hallway knocked on the glass.
This is insane, she shouted. You can't do this.
$30 million doesn't just get held. My mother rounded on her. Lower your voice.
Sloane spun toward me then, eyes wild. You knew about this, she said.
Not a question. I met her gaze, calm, neutral. I knew there was more to the will, I said. Nothing else. My mother's eyes snapped to me sharp with warning. Mr. Buffett. Finch closed the folder. This concludes today's reading, he said. You will each receive copies of the relevant documents. Further communication will be conducted through counsel. Sloane grabbed her purse and stormed out, heels striking the marble like punctuation marks. My mother followed, stopping only long enough to look at me. Her voice dropped, controlled, dangerous. We will discuss this later. I nodded. Later was fine. 3 days passed before anyone contacted me. It wasn't my mother. It wasn't Sloan. It was Mr. Finch's assistant. She called while I was at work, during my lunch break. I had stepped outside with my coffee, leaning against the brick wall behind the building where the noise from the street softened into a hum. Miss First arrived. "Hale," she said, "Mr. Finch wanted to ensure you received your documents." "I did," I said. "There is an additional envelope, addressed only to you." I closed my eyes. "I'll come by," I said. When I arrived at the firm, the receptionist didn't smile. She just handed me a thick, sealed envelope. Inside was not money. Inside was a map, not literal, practical. A timeline! My father's handwriting, careful, slightly shaky toward the end, annotated the margins. Dates. Account numbers. Bank names. Screenshots printed and highlighted, and the letter. "Mara, if you are reading this, it means I did not have time to finish what I started. I am sorry for that. I am not sorry for trusting you." I sat there for a long time, the city moving outside the window while I read. He hadn't trusted my mother anymore. Not after he noticed transfers he didn't recognize. Not after his signature appeared on documents he didn't remember signing. He hadn't confronted her. He'd watched. And then he'd watched Sloan. Luxury purchases routed through shell companies. Consulting fees paid to an LLC Sloan controlled. Art acquisitions. Offshore accounts. All during the years my father struggled to remember words. All signed with a power of attorney, my mother had quietly amended. I exhaled slowly. This wasn't about favoritism. This was theft. And worse, it was sloppy. Sloan had been careless. She always was. She assumed no one would ever question her. She assumed my mother would always clean up after her. My father had seen it, and he documented everything. At the bottom of the letter was a final line. "I need you to decide when this ends." I folded the papers neatly and placed them back in the envelope. I didn't call anyone. I didn't text Sloan, even when she left me 6 voicemails that night, her voice swinging wildly between anger and forced charm. "Just tell me what you know," she said in one. "We're sisters. This is family." Thank family. I let the calls go unanswered. The first thing I did was hire my own attorney, quietly. Not one recommended by Mr. Finch. Not one from my mother's circle, and a woman named Denise Walker who specialized in financial litigation and had a reputation for patience. She didn't react when I slid the documents across the table. She read. She asked questions. She took notes. When she finally looked up, her expression was neutral but focused. "This is substantial," she said, "and it's clean. Your father was thorough." "I don't want revenge," I said. She nodded. "You want resolution." "I want the truth to stand on its own," I said. "That's possible," she replied, "but it will take time." "I have time," I said. And I meant it. Over the next 6 weeks, Sloan unraveled publicly. She posted vague Instagram stories about betrayal and stress. She leaked to a lifestyle blog that family legal drama was delaying an inheritance. She hosted a dinner party anyway. Tagged luxury brands. Smiled too hard. My mother moved faster, but less visibly. She contacted me through intermediaries. A cousin. A family friend. A former professor of mine who suddenly wanted to check in. Each message carried the same tone. "Let this go. Don't embarrass us. Think about the family name." I responded to none of them. Instead, I watched. I tracked Sloan's spending. Her new apartment lease. The deposits she assumed were coming. I compared them to the trust's frozen status. Denise and I met weekly. The forensic accountants worked quietly. And then, one Tuesday morning, Denise called me. "I think you should come in," she said. When I arrived, she had something new on her desk. A single document. An email chain? Dated 4 months before my father died, between my mother and Sloan. The subject line was simple. "We need to move faster." Denise slid it toward me. In the email, my mother wrote, "He's getting worse. If we don't consolidate now, we risk delays," Sloan replied. "I know. I've already transferred the remaining funds." He didn't notice the last one. Attached was a confirmation receipt. 7 figures. Transferred from an account my father believed was dormant. Authorized using a digital signature generated while he was hospitalized. I stared at the screen. This wasn't inference. This wasn't interpretation. This was proof. Denise leaned back slightly. This, she said, changes everything. I nodded once. Because now the truth didn't just exist. It was documented, time-stamped, and ready. I didn't smile. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady. Because I knew something my sister didn't. She thought the worst had already happened. She had no idea what was coming, and she had unknowingly set the stage for it herself. I folded my hands in my lap and waited. Sloane decided the silence meant she'd won. That was always her mistake, confusing my absence with weakness. 2 months after the will reading, she announced her engagement. She did it the way she did everything, publicly, loudly, and strategically. A curated post went up at exactly 9 a.m. on a Saturday. Sunlit balcony, ring centered in the frame, caption polished within an inch of sincerity. When one chapter closes, another begins. The comments flooded in. Influencers, brand reps, friends who measured loyalty in likes. My mother shared it within minutes. The announcement wasn't just about love, it was a deadline. I understood that immediately. Engagements came with events. Showers, dinners, guest lists, witnesses, and, more importantly, expectations. If Sloane could move forward publicly, then whatever was happening behind the scenes could be reframed as minor legal delays. If she looked unbothered, people would assume she was secure. She wanted momentum. I let her have it. The invitation arrived a week later. A thick envelope. Heavy cardstock. My name handwritten on the front in my mother's careful script. Inside was an invitation to an engagement dinner. Private room, high-end restaurant. 30 guests, family, friends, business associates. At the bottom, in smaller print, a short speech will be given. I read it once. Then I placed it on the counter and went back to making tea. By then, the forensic audit was nearly complete. Denise didn't rush it. She let the accountants follow every trail, even the ones that seemed redundant. Shell companies dissolved into others, accounts routed through tax shelters, luxury purchases logged as business expenses. It wasn't flashy. It was devastating. Sloane hadn't just taken money. She'd built a lifestyle on it. And my mother hadn't just enabled it. She'd orchestrated it. Every authorization, every signature, every temporary transfer. They'd assumed no one would ever look closely. They'd assumed my father's decline made him irrelevant. They'd assumed I would stay invisible. Denise compiled everything into a single digital file and a physical binder. Receipts, emails, bank statements, medical records confirming my father's cognitive state at the time of the signatures, witness affidavits, from a nurse who'd questioned a transaction request, from a financial advisor my mother had quietly dismissed. At the front of the binder was the email chain. We need to move faster. I didn't ask what would happen next. Denise already knew. They're hosting a public event, she said. And your sister has positioned herself as financially secure. Yes, I said.
But you're not. Then that's where the truth belongs.
The night of the engagement dinner, I arrived early. Not dramatically early. Just enough to be unremarkable. I wore a black dress. Simple. Tailored. No jewelry except my watch. When I walked into the private room, conversations paused briefly, then resumed. Sloane stood near the center, radiant. Her fiancé beside her, pleasant, well-dressed, unaware. My mother moved through the room like a hostess on instinct, greeting guests, smoothing edges. When she saw me, her smile flickered.
Mara, she said. You came. I said I would, I replied. She leaned in, her voice low.
Let's not do this tonight. I met her eyes.
Do what?
She searched my face, looking for cracks. She didn't find any. Dinner unfolded in courses. Sloane laughed too loudly. Told stories that made her sound generous, accomplished, indispensable. She mentioned investments, future plans, stability. My mother nodded along, adding context when needed. I listened. I nodded who was in the room. My aunt who worked in finance, my father's former business partner, a family friend who was a notary, witnesses. At dessert, Sloane clinked her glass. The room quieted. She stood beaming. I just want to thank everyone, she said, for supporting me during a very emotional time. Losing my dad has been hard, but knowing I have such an incredible family." She paused, glanced at me, smiled thinly.
Means everything. Polite laughter. Polite laughter.
She gestured to her fiancé, said a few rehearsed words about love and partnership. Then she looked at my mother. "And of course, my mom," she said, voice softening, "for always protecting us, for holding things together." My mother placed a hand over her heart. Applause followed. Sloane took a breath. "And before we move on, there's something else," she said. "Something important." She turned toward me. "Mara," she said, "I know things have been complicated, but family is family. And I want you to know, whatever you're feeling, we can work it out, privately." Every eye in the room shifted. This was her move. Public reconciliation, framed as generosity. If I declined, I'd look bitter. If I accepted, she'd control the narrative. I stood slowly, not abruptly, not hesitantly. I felt the weight of the room settle. "Thank you," I said. My voice carried without effort. "I agree. Family matters should be handled with care." Sloane smiled, relieved. "I'm glad you feel that way," she said. "So am I," I replied. I reached into my bag and placed something on the table. A single envelope. "I also believe," I continued, "that important things should be shared with the people they affect." My mother's smile vanished. Sloane's eyes dropped to the envelope. "What's that?" she asked. I didn't answer her. I looked at the room. "At the will reading," I said, "there was mention of a condition attached to certain funds. Since then, an independent forensic audit has been completed." A ripple moved through the guests. My mother stood abruptly. "This is not the time. It's exactly the time," I said calmly. I opened the envelope and removed a single page. "Not the whole binder, just enough." "This is an email," I said, "sent 4 months before my father died." I read the subject line aloud. "We need to move faster." Sloane's face drained of color. My mother stepped toward me. "Mara!" she said sharply. I kept reading. "He's getting worse," I quoted. "If we don't consolidate now, we risk delays." A chair scraped. Someone inhaled sharply. I turned the page. "I've already transferred the remaining funds." He didn't notice the last one. Silence fell. Not shocked silence. Heavy silence. I placed the paper back on the table. "This email," I said, "is one of several pieces of documentation currently under review by counsel." Sloane's hands were shaking. My mother's face had gone rigid. I looked at Sloane. "You asked for privacy," I said. "You also asked for trust."
I let the pause stretch. You don't get both.
No one spoke. No one laughed. The waiter froze near the doorway. My mother's voice broke through, thin and furious. "This is a misunderstanding." I met her gaze. "The documents will speak for themselves," I said. I turned to the room. "I won't take more of your evening," I said, "but I won't participate in a story that isn't true." I stepped back. Sloane opened her mouth. Then she screamed, "Not words! Just sound." The room erupted. Questions, whispers, chairs moving. I picked up my bag. As I walked toward the door, Denise's voice echoed in my head. "Let the facts do the work." I didn't look back, because the exposure had already begun. And what came next would not be mine to control. It would be theirs to face. I didn't attend the aftermath. I went home, fed my cat, washed my hands, and went to bed at my usual time. By morning, the ripples had reached shore. Denise called me at 8:12 a.m. "Your sister's accounts have been formally flagged," she said. "Multiple institutions. A trust remains frozen." And the engagement dinner did exactly what we expected. I pictured the room again. The faces, the silence, the scream. I felt nothing sharp about it. "Thank you," I said. "There will be inquiries," Denise continued, "from banks, from tax authorities, possibly from your father's former partners." "I understand," she paused. "Your mother's attorney reached out." "I'm sure he did. He wants to discuss a global resolution." I smiled faintly. "We can listen." The next week unfolded quietly, but not invisibly. Sloane's engagement post disappeared first. Then her fiancé removed his relationship status. Then her Instagram went private. A lifestyle blog published a short update, carefully worded, about unexpected legal complications affecting the Hale estate. No names, no accusations. But people read between lines. Brand invitations stopped. A real estate listing was quietly pulled. The apartment she'd leased remained unfurnished. My mother, meanwhile, stopped hosting. No more charity photos. No more public luncheons. She moved her meetings behind closed doors. When we finally sat across from her attorney, a man with tired eyes and a voice trained for damage control, he didn't deny anything. He didn't need to.
The documentation is extensive, he said, and
persuasive.
Denise nodded once.
The funds transferred under questionable authorization, he continued, can be returned to the estate. I waited. In exchange, he said, your mother is requesting discretion. There it was, a last currency she had left. I'm not interested in discretion, I said, not sharply, just clearly. I'm interested in accuracy. He looked at me, assessing. The truth doesn't require embellishment, I added. It only requires access. Silence followed. Then he nodded. The formal consequences took months. They were procedural, methodical, unavoidable. Funds were clawed back, tax filings amended, penalties assessed, no dramatic courtroom scenes, no handcuffs, just reputations, quietly dismantled by paperwork. Sloane attempted to call me once more. I didn't answer. She sent a message instead. You could have handled this differently. I read it, then I archived it. My relationship with my mother changed permanently. We met once more, briefly, at a cafe. She looked older, smaller. You've made your point, she said. I didn't make a point, I replied. I told the truth. She pressed her lips together. You didn't have to do it that way. There wasn't another way that didn't require my silence, I said. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she nodded, once. We didn't hug. We didn't argue. We paid separately. The estate was eventually redistributed according to the corrected records. It wasn't dramatic. It was fair. I used my portion carefully. I paid off my apartment. I set up a scholarship in my father's name, quietly, without press. I kept my life small, but this time it was by choice. Months later, I received a letter. Not from a lawyer, from the forensic accounting firm. They thanked me for my cooperation, for my patience, for allowing the process to unfold without interference. At the bottom, a handwritten note. Your father would have been proud. I folded the letter and placed it in the same envelope as his. I didn't feel victorious. I felt complete. Because I hadn't taken anything that wasn't mine. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't chased revenge. I had simply stopped absorbing damage meant for someone else. And that was enough.